Hey everyone, in this episode I'll be showing you how to make this exact scene. We're going to be celebrating D5's 2.9 update on how to create terrain and landscapes. This is a brand new feature built directly into the tool, and so we'll be able to create stunning renderings like these and this awesome animation you see on screen. So let's get started. So the 2.9 update just got released, and what this is going to do is actually give us terrain functionality. Previously to the 2.9 update, your file kind of looked like this, and it was just gray at the bottom. Now you'll actually start with a terrain plane, which is kind of nice. And when you click on the terrain plane, you're going to get this whole new UI over to the right. And this is where you can sculpt, paint, and even import height maps into your scene. So what I mean by that is if I click here upward, I actually get a brush, and from here I can actually paint. And so what's cool about this is now you no longer need to model your landscape in like 3ds Max or SketchUp, Blender, whatever, and then import it. You can actually do that right in here, and then you can paint, which is really cool. So not only can I go upward, I can go downward. I can also erase. Okay, I can smooth, and then I can flatten to make a plateau. But one really nice thing is they actually have built-in textures. So if I want, I can just do almost like a stamp. So watch this. Let me hit upwards, stamp, and there we go. So I can basically just paint with this. Think of it as your Photoshop brush. And then I've got like a bunch of different noise brushes as well, which is really nice to kind of create some realistic landscapes, right? So this is really cool. So I also want to point out that they're also adding like 3D stamps. So what I mean by that is if you click here, you can actually drop in a hill like this, which is pretty cool because if you drag this down, it'll literally move the terrain with you. So really, really cool stuff. You can even change some of the height parameters from here, and it will shrink as well. So now we've got like a baby mountain. So really, really cool. All this is scalable with your gizmo, and you can even move it around. So we can use this to our advantage to kind of make scenes really quickly. So I want to create like an autumn type of environment. Let's say something like in the forest, right? So what I can do is just find a bunch of hills and start painting them here, or stamping them, as I can say. I'll bring this down and I'll scale it. Bring it down and bring it forward. So I want to have, some hills in the background, and I want to think about like my camera angle. So I'm going to have this all covered with trees and some hills in the background. So the cool thing about these 3D stamps is they're actually editable as well. So once you place them, you can go in and actually brush more detail, which is nice. So you're not just stuck with, just something like you've downloaded and like that's it. You can actually make it editable. And I kind of like how they actually like blend into each other. It's like all dynamic. You see what's happening there? So really, really cool that we're getting this system. So to get back to our task at hand, I'm going to start smoothing this, and then we'll scatter in some trees and we'll make a nice little autumn scene. All right, I'm going to go here. Sorry, I'm going to go to smooth, and then I'm just going to smooth out my mountain that I was messing with here. Okay, and I'll smooth some of these details out just so it's not super, super rough. Okay, cool. Not only can we sculpt, but we can also paint. So if you switch to the paint button, you actually have different palettes. So if I click here, I can actually choose a type of path. So let's say I want to actually, let's go with this one. I want to paint in like a woodland area. So this is going to be added here. And now when I hit paint, look what's happening here. So I can actually make a path. So this is really useful because now I can actually draw directly onto my landscape instead of having to model that and then set up a different material area. You can even customize the peaks. So right now this is like a snow peak. So I can actually click something else. Let me just grab this just because it's something different and it'll stick out. And you see what's happening here? Now we've got that gravel sand here. Now if I close, you can see what's happening. So really, really cool. So you can customize the peak. You can customize the slope. The slope is this guy. So to illustrate that, let me switch to the grassland, and that's changed. So really, really easy way to customize the look and feel of your mountains. And then something that's really cool is if you don't want to go one by one, because it can be a little time consuming, there's actually a full scene preset. So if I go all the way down here, these are our stamps, I can actually just click this and it's going to import the correct peaks, slopes, and landscape texture for me. And we're talking about like one click to completely change the look of it. So you can go into snowy or beachy or deserty. So this is cool. And then this is a desert. There we go. So that's pretty cool that you can do that. I'm going to switch back to forest landscape because we're doing some sort of like autumn look, right? Not something out of Dune. But again, I want to point out that it can be really simple to just get something in there and then you can start creating. So this is cool. I can definitely like go back in and change my peak to be snowy if I want. But again, the point is it's all here, it's available, and you can instantly see the difference with this guy right here. You know, what's considered the peak versus your slope. So let me show you that. Switch this to like a blue. You see that? That's where this guy is going to come up. And then the ground are all these guys. So just pointing that out. I've reset these. So now let's talk about how we're actually going to tackle this. So I'm going to continue sculpting a little bit more. I want to add some hills. I think this is a little too craggily, if that's even a word. I'm going to increase my size. Again, this is like Photoshop. I'm increasing the brush size. Just painting. We just want a bunch of hills. Okay. Hills and mountains. So the mountain is really going to be the focal point of my image. So that can stick up the most. I just want this to be kind of, you know, some simple mounds here and there, just so it's not flat. What I mean by that is now when I look here, you see I've got all these like cool little mounds popping up. I don't want to see that horizon line back there. That's basically what I'm trying to do. So now that I've got this in a decent spot, right, all I have to do is add some scatter on top. So I go over here, add scatter. I'm going to select my material. My terrain area is actually getting picked up as a scatter area. So that means you see this blue line, all of that can be filled with assets. So one thing I want to point out, because the area is so large, it's going to take much longer to generate your scatter area. So if it hangs for a bit, don't be scared. It's just like, we're talking about a huge, massive area to cover. Okay, cool. So we've got our grid, right? So this is basically what's going to distribute all of our assets. And then we see our traditional scatter library. So I'm going to click this and I'm going to search for broadleaf because I want something autumn-like. So I want something that's deciduous. So I'm going to be looking for like orange, yellow, and green types of trees. I can throw this guy in, some ginkgo. We'll grab that. We'll grab that. And just remember, once you download the asset, you do need to click it again. People forget that all the time, and it's like, oh, why is nothing spawning? Well, that's why. All right, I'll add this guy. And you see, it's actually dropping these guys in. I'm going to add this guy, and I see that's being put here. One thing I want to point out, if you're using 2.9, you'll notice that this probability has actually changed. It used to be percentage based. Now it's actually just numbers. It's a little bit more logical instead of you having to do a math like, oh, this is 25%. So I can actually just increase this. And now see how the other ones are shrinking. So now this is 193. So that's what's happening there. That's what that guy's about. So now that I've got this here, I'm going to go down to distribution. I'm going to click this white map right here because right now it's just generating it almost like in a grid on this flat white plane. If I go here, I can actually choose like a nice height map, and there we go. So it's going to generate trees from there. I can increase the density. So let's say 5. That way it's 5 times as dense. Okay. So look at how much more filled that is. And I want to think about, you know, kind of like the ground level, right? What that's going to look like. So I think this is a good amount of density. And now that I'm setting up, you know, almost like my angle here, I can think about what I want up here. I can just make this all snow white. I can add some different trees up here, which I can make a different scatter range. So this is what I like to do when I'm thinking about all this. So I've got that there. Next thing I want to do after I did the density here, I want to talk about the transformations. So right now, they're basically spawning between 80% of their normal scale size and 120. If I want more variation, because right now it's a little samey, if I change this guy to like 200, you'll see what's going to happen. We're going to see a lot of like roller coaster kind of looking trees. So you see how we're getting those pops. So if everything looks a little too regular, play with these guys. These guys are your friend. Same thing with the rotation and the offsets, basically where they're spawning from each other. So now that I've got that, this looks good. And this is all conforming to the landscape, right? So let's say you're in the situation where you did your landscape first, you did your scatter, but you're actually not happy with the geometry. You can actually edit the terrain and then scatter will regenerate. So just as an example, I'll switch to terrain and I'll just add a little hill over here. Increase the size. So you see how it's slowly coming up. You can't see it because it has to pass the trees. So I'm going to add a bunch just so you can see the top of the hills. And now that doesn't look good, right? So I'm going to hit escape and then click scatter and look at that. It's asking me to regenerate because it's detected a new geometry for the terrain. So then it respawned and you see how this area is much higher than before. That's because it adjusted to that. So now if I were to drop here, we're seeing those hills pop out as well. So that's really, really cool. So now this guy's sticking out like a sore thumb because he's our mountain, but he's also just like a green blob, which isn't, you know, obviously great or anything. So let's go over to terrain. I'm gonna go to paint and I'm gonna change my peak to be something snowy. Go with this. So this is a little too snowy. So let's try and find something a little like in between. All right, so I'm gonna go with 2 and then let me zoom in and let me see if I could play with the scaling a bit. So if I lower this, we're going to see, yeah, a lot more detail. Do like 0.03. Yep, that's a little bit better. Let's try, I'm going to do 0.1. All right. And then what I could do is actually create a scatter area on top of this so we can get different types of trees. So that's kind of cool that you can like customize that. So what I can do is select material and then click this. And this is actually just the top of my little mountain here. Yeah, I can click nature here. And then I can go down to conifer because those are typically what you would see up there. And I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to grab like these guys right here. Yeah, there we go. So right now that's going to help blend in some of that snowiness. I can also lower the distribution just so it's not as dense. Yeah, so we'll just see a couple of those. So one thing I want to point out is if you notice, look at the amount of faces I've got here, right? We're talking about 45 billion faces. And if your performance is really bad, they added this guy, the FPS booster. I highly recommend checking this on. This is brand new in 2.9, and this is basically like doubling my frame rate from before. So this is huge. Now let's focus on camera. I'm gonna set a new scene, do something like this. You know, I wanna think about the composition. I kinda like this because I've got this tall guy right here. I'm gonna update this, go to my camera, right? Switch to 2 point, and I'm going to increase my focal length just a little bit. Going somewhere around there. Lower. Yeah, perfect. So I'm getting some nice color here. And then I'm going to set up my depth of field to be the mountain top over there. Add some blur. So see how these guys are blurring out down here. And now I want to customize my environment a bit. I want to do like a couple little wisps right here. Make them a little thicker. Yep, perfect. So I could go dynamic with this, or I could go HDRI, really up to us. That one seems a little too bright. Let's try cloudy too. Yeah, I mean, that looks cool, but it looks a little grim. So we'll go with partly sunny. This is kind of cool. Oh, I kind of like how the light's coming from there. That's pretty nifty, actually. I like that a lot. So I'll do that. I can play with the light a bit. Then if I want, I could add a little bit of fog right down here. Increase the fog a bit. Yeah, that way we're getting some more depth. Okay, and I increase the height. So we see it down here as well. Play with my exposure. Yeah, I could do something like that. Going for like a really like bloomy look here. More on the stylized side. Because why not? And then I'll add some vignetting. Because again, we want to focus on that. I'll update this guy, and that looks pretty cool. The other thing I could do, just like for fun, because I set it up to be an autumn scene, if I want, with literally like one click, I could actually switch it to be like a snowy scene just by increasing this right here. So you see how the snow's coming in here and there's snowflakes. So if you want to mess around, you've got that as well. But I think overall, I'm happy with this. I'm going to render it and then see what it looks like. I'm going to go over here. Let's do a 2K. Actually just go back to my camera and make sure it's on 16:9. Perfect. 2K, and then let's render. And this is what we got. So this is pretty cool. I like this a lot. I think one thing I could probably tweak is boost the depth of field a little bit more. And probably change the mesh a little bit here to make it look a little less jagged. Okay, increase my blur some more. Make sure my focus is set. Resync that. X out. And now I'm just going to fly over. Get that on. Actually, what's nice about this is you can actually set up your camera in a bunch of different spots because you literally have a whole forest. So like, don't feel like you have to follow what I just did. You can totally have fun with it. Like even this is pretty cool, and you could like go crazy and actually add some volumetrics here. You kind of see that glow there. That's pretty sweet. Yeah, so you could do something like that. You could render that out. Anyways, let's see what's going on here. Yeah, you see how they're kind of like craggly like that. So let's go back to terrain. Just click this. And I'm going to go to sculpt, and I'm just going to smooth this out, lower the strength, and lower the size. And it's going to ask us to regenerate, but before we do that, let's just take another look. Yeah, but this is crazy. Like, look at how much we generated here. Like, even this could be a rendering, right? Actually, let's make it a rendering. We'll have that, and then I'll set up my light so the tops of the trees brighten up a bit. I click the camera button, sync this. Aspect ratio, let's do 16:9. Set focus to be, let's say this mountain. That's great. Leave the blur there. That's great. Yeah, I love what the fog's doing here. It's awesome. And now we have 2 images to choose from. And then I can go in and then generate. The only issue now is now that I'm going to regenerate, I'm probably going to lose this tree on the right. So I'll probably have to tweak the composition. So what I could have done is probably detached it by double clicking it and then making it its own standalone item so it doesn't get removed, but not the end of the world. And while this is up, something I want to point out is there's 2 ways of handling the scale of the object. If you remember under transformation, we had the 80% to 200%. So it's scaling between there, but here you can actually have it add on top of that. So if you did 200%, it could potentially be 400% if the baseline were 200. So just pointing that out, you can do individual height changes for each type of tree asset. And then the other thing is when it comes to vertical or along normal, in case you're unfamiliar with this, if it's on vertical, it's going to spawn directly straight up. If it's along normal, so let's say this is my plane, the terrain plane, along normal is going to be like this. It's going to spawn that way because it's going to be perpendicular. This is vertical. This is along normal, right? So just remember that. So this is what I mean by what's going to happen to our composition. No big deal. All I'm going to do is move my camera around, okay, and try and find another scene. Yeah, I mean, if I want, I could really go super far back out. Yeah, let's look at this. Yeah. Do something like this. I could even do like a camera clipping plane if I want to get these guys out of here. So I've got a lot of options because I literally have like a billion trees here. Let's see, so I've got a lot of detail here. Yeah, maybe I do this. I'm really trying to find a nice composition. It's a little tricky because of how tall these trees are. Another thing you could do, just to help you out, right over here, if you click this, you're going to get your rule of thirds grid. Basically, the idea is something interesting should be happening along these intersections or along the verticals and horizon line. So like this is a good composition, right? Because I've got something along my vertical and I've got something interesting at the intersection point. And it's kind of like a nice balance between the sky here and this. So if I were to just set that up, got that here, I could then start playing with my environment settings just to make the lighting a little bit better. So it's really all about what you want to do. Do you want to light this up? Do you want to light the trees up down there? I like the sun coming from here because this is glowing a bit. Same with those. So I'm just going to save that. And we've got this. Yeah, that's awesome. So now what I can do is if I hold down shift click, I've selected both of these, I can go over to image and then add them to my render queue. So I can click this. I didn't save, so let me hit save. Okay, let's do our render queue. I go over to my queue. I now have a blue little button here. And now I can select both of these and I can actually override the settings right here with the resolution. So I can make them 2K or 4K right here. So if I do 4K and hit OK, notice how that's going to change at the same time. So I'm going to hit render and wait for these to render out. It's going to save your project and then it's going to start working on each image. Okay, and our aerial view just rendered out and this is what that looks like. This looks awesome, right? We've got beautiful light hitting the tops of the trees. We've got fog down here. Looks extremely realistic. And we've got some nice snow covered tops over here. That nice gradation of the slope into the top. And this is our other rendering. Looks awesome. So we've got some nice light here, lighting up these treetops and everything, and the depth of field is working correctly. If you wanted to take this to the next step, you could actually just animate these scenes. So what I like to do is just grab the scene I clicked, and I can hit add to current view, move my camera down, and now I've created a short little animation, just like that. And then if I wanted to do it for the other scene, I click that scene, and then I can hit current view, move the camera again, And there we go. So we've got that. And then we've got that. And if you want, you could remove the smooth and just go linear. So what that's going to do is they're going to blend a little bit nicer. So that's going to go straight into this one. There we go. So there's no slowdown. So that's the end of this video. If you liked it, please drop a like, ask a question. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. See you next time.